I pulled into my driveway at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night, 3 whole days earlier than Derek expected me home. The house looked dark except for a dim light glowing from our bedroom window upstairs. My body ached from the long flight back from Seattle, and all I wanted was to collapse into bed and surprise my husband with breakfast in the morning. But then I saw it, a silver sedan parked right outside our house, tucked close to the curb. The hood was still warm when I walked past it. I could feel the heat radiating off the metal even though the October air was crisp and cool. My stomach twisted into a tight knot. We didn't know anyone with a silver sedan. Our neighbours all had trucks or SUVs. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for my house keys, and I had to take 3 deep breaths before I could steady myself enough to slide the key into the lock. The front door opened without a sound. I'd oiled those hinges myself last month because they'd started squeaking. Now I was grateful for that small act of home maintenance. The living room was empty, but I could hear something from upstairs. Laughter, low voices mixing together in a way that made my skin crawl. One of those voices belonged to my husband. The other voice was female. My heart started pounding so hard I thought it might burst right through my chest. Each step up the staircase felt like I was climbing a mountain. My legs were heavy, like someone had tied weights around my ankles. The wooden stairs didn't creak under my feet because I knew exactly which ones made noise and which ones didn't. 8 years of living in this house had taught me every secret it held. The bedroom door was open just a crack, just enough for me to see inside without being seen, just enough for the sounds to pour out into the hallway where I stood frozen. Derek was sitting on our bed, with the blue comforter I'd picked out at that home goods store downtown, the one with the white pillows we'd bought on our 5th anniversary trip. He was running his fingers through a woman's long, dark hair, stroking it like it was the most precious thing in the world. The woman was leaning into him, her body relaxed and comfortable. She was wearing something silky and cream-coloured that caught the lamplight. As my eyes adjusted, I realised with a sick jolt what she had on: my robe. The woman was wearing my silk robe that Derek had given me for Christmas 2 years ago. Derek's voice drifted out to me, soft and tender. I hadn't heard him use that tone with me in months, maybe longer. "You're so sweet," he murmured, his lips close to her ear. "Not like my boring wife who only cares about her stupid job." The words hit me like physical blows. Boring wife, stupid job. I thought about all those late nights I'd worked to help pay for this house, for his car, for the life we'd built together. I thought about all the times I'd cancelled plans with friends because Derek said he needed me home. All the times I'd made myself smaller, quieter, less demanding because he'd complained I was too much. The woman giggled. Actually giggled like a teenager with a crush. "She doesn't appreciate you like I do," the woman said, and her voice was familiar somehow. My brain was working too slowly to place it, too overwhelmed by what I was seeing to process what I was hearing. I must have moved, or maybe my shadow fell across the doorway because suddenly both of them turned toward me, their faces swung in my direction like they'd been caught in a spotlight. Time seemed to stop completely. The woman's face came into full view, and everything inside me went cold. Not the cold of sadness or heartbreak, the cold of pure, burning rage mixed with complete and utter disbelief. I knew this woman. I knew her well. This wasn't some stranger Derek had met at a bar. This wasn't some co-worker or random affair. This was someone who had sat at my dinner table, someone who had hugged me and called me sister. Someone who had cried on my shoulder just 3 months ago about her divorce and how hard her life had become. This was Vanessa, Derek's younger sister. My mind couldn't process it at first. The information was too wrong, too impossible. Sisters don't do this. Families don't betray each other like this. But there she was, in my robe, in my bed, with my husband's hands tangled in her hair. Vanessa's eyes went wide with panic. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked like someone had just dumped ice water over her head. Derek scrambled backward off the bed so fast he almost fell. His face had gone completely white, drained of all colour like someone had pulled a plug and let all the blood run out. "Natalie, this isn't..." He couldn't even finish a sentence. Words tumbled out of his mouth in broken pieces that made no sense. But I didn't want to hear his excuses. Not yet. Not until I'd said what I needed to say. My hands were shaking, but not from sadness. Not from the tears I should have been crying. They were shaking with rage that had been building for 3 weeks, ever since I'd first discovered what they'd been doing. My right hand moved almost on its own, pulling my phone from my jacket pocket. I opened the camera app and hit record. The red dot appeared on the screen, capturing everything: Derek's guilty face, Vanessa wrapped in my robe, the rumpled sheets on the bed we'd shared for 8 years. "I want both of you to know something," I said, and my voice came out steady and cold, so cold it didn't even sound like me. "Before you start making excuses or begging for forgiveness." Derek held up his hands like he was trying to calm a wild animal. "Nat, please just let me explain." "Quiet," I snapped, and he actually flinched. "Good. I'm going to tell you something, and I need you both to listen very carefully." Vanessa had started crying now, black mascara running down her cheeks in ugly streaks. She pulled the robe tighter around herself like that would somehow protect her from what was coming. 3 weeks ago," I continued, my eyes moving between Derek and Vanessa, "I found some interesting charges on our credit card. Jewelry I never received, restaurant bills from places I'd never been to, hotel stays right here in our own city on nights when you told me you were working late at the office." Derek's face somehow got even whiter. Vanessa had stopped crying and was just staring at me now, frozen like a deer in headlights. "So I hired someone to look into it," I said, "a private investigator named Leonard Walsh. And do you know what he found?" Neither of them answered. They couldn't. They both knew exactly what was coming. "He found the embezzlement, Derek. Over $200,000 stolen from your clients, small amounts here and there, thinking no one would notice. He found the plane tickets to Costa Rica scheduled for next month. He found the fake passports you've been having made. He found everything." Vanessa made a sound like a wounded animal. Derek just stood there, completely still, like if he didn't move I might forget he was there. "And he found out that Vanessa wasn't just visiting to recover from her divorce," I continued, looking directly at her now. "He found out that you two have been planning this together for months, that you've done this before with your ex-husband. That's why he really left you, isn't it? Not because of irreconcilable differences, but because you tried to rob him blind." "That's not," Vanessa started, but I cut her off. "I have bank records, Vanessa. I have emails. I have text messages. I have everything." I held up my phone, still recording. "And now I have this too. A nice video of both of you, caught red-handed." That's when I heard it. The doorbell ringing downstairs, followed immediately by firm knocking on the front door. I smiled, actually smiled for the first time since I'd walked into this nightmare. "That would be Detective Patricia Green," I said calmly. "I called her from my car before I came inside. She's very interested in talking to both of you about financial fraud." The colour that had drained from Derek's face didn't come back. Instead, he went a sickly shade of green. Vanessa started hyperventilating, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She swayed on her feet, then her legs gave out completely and she crumpled to the floor like a puppet with cut strings. Derek rushed to her side, and the way he touched her, the way his hands cradled her face, the way he looked at her with such desperate concern, made my stomach turn. This wasn't just about money. This wasn't just about betrayal. What they had was deeper, sicker, more twisted than I'd even imagined. Heavy footsteps started climbing the stairs toward my bedroom, and I knew that everything was about to change forever. 3 weeks earlier, I'd been standing in almost this exact same spot in our bedroom, but everything had felt different then. Normal. Safe. I was unpacking my suitcase from a business trip to Chicago, hanging up my clothes and tossing dirty laundry into the hamper. Derek had been downstairs watching television, and I remember thinking how quiet the house felt. How empty, even with both of us in it. That's when I decided to check our credit card statement online. Not because I suspected anything. Just because I always reviewed our finances on the first day back from trips. It was a habit I developed years ago when I first started traveling for work. I sat down at my laptop and logged into our joint account. The statement loaded slowly, line by line, and at first, nothing seemed unusual. Grocery store charges, gas stations, the usual utility bills. Then I saw it. A jewelry store charge for $850, dated from last Tuesday when I'd been in Chicago giving a presentation to a potential client. My heart skipped a beat, but I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe Derek had bought me a surprise gift. Our anniversary was coming up in 2 months. That had to be it. I kept scrolling. Another charge caught my eye. Bellissimo, an expensive Italian restaurant downtown. $193, dated from the same night as the jewelry purchase. Derek and I hadn't been to Bellissimo in over a year because it was so pricey. We'd been trying to save money for a potential house renovation. My hands started shaking slightly as I scrolled faster through the statement. There were more charges I didn't recognize. The Riverside Hotel, right here in our own city, charged 4 times in the past month, always on nights when I'd been out of town, always for one-night stays. Why would Derek need a hotel room in the city where we lived? I heard his footsteps on the stairs and quickly closed the laptop. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. There had to be reasonable explanations. Maybe he was surprising me with a romantic getaway and had booked rooms to check them out first. Maybe the jewelry was a gift. Maybe there were perfectly innocent reasons for all of it. But deep in my gut, I knew better. "You okay?" Derek asked when he walked into the bedroom. He was carrying a glass of water and wearing the sweatpants I'd bought him last Christmas. "You look pale." "Just tired from the trip," I lied, forcing a smile onto my face. "I think I'm going to take a bath and go to bed early." He nodded without much interest and turned to leave. "I'll probably stay up and watch the game," he said over his shoulder. After he left, I sat there on our bed for a long time staring at my closed laptop. Part of me wanted to march downstairs and confront him right then, demand to know what those charges were for. But another part of me, the smarter part, knew I needed more information first. The next morning, after Derek left for his home office in the basement, I called my best friend Beth. She was a lawyer, sharp and practical, and someone I trusted completely. "I need your advice on something," I told her, keeping my voice low even though Derek couldn't possibly hear me from downstairs. "And I need you to be completely honest with me, even if the truth is going to hurt." I told her about the credit card charges, about the jewelry I'd never received, the restaurant bills from places we hadn't been together, the hotel rooms in our own city. I could hear her breathing change on the other end of the line, going from casual to serious in an instant. "Natalie," she said carefully, "I think you need to consider the possibility that Derek might be having an affair." Hearing the words out loud made them real in a way they hadn't been when they were just thoughts in my head. My throat tightened and tears pricked at my eyes, but I forced them back. "I know," I whispered. "I've been thinking the same thing, but I need to be sure before I do anything. I need proof." Beth was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I know someone who can help. A private investigator named Leonard Walsh. He's retired police, completely professional and discreet. He specializes in financial investigations, but he's handled plenty of infidelity cases too. Can I give him your number?" I agreed. And that same afternoon, Leonard called me. His voice was kind but businesslike. We met at a coffee shop across town where no one would recognize me. He was a man in his 60s with silver hair and sharp grey eyes that seemed to see right through people. I gave him copies of the credit card statements and told him everything I'd noticed. The late nights Derek claimed he was working, the way he'd become distant and cold toward me over the past few months, the cruel little comments he'd started making about my job, my appearance, my personality. "How long do you think this has been going on?" Leonard asked, making notes in a small leather notebook. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe a few months. But honestly, I've been traveling so much for work that I might have missed signs earlier than that." Leonard looked at me with something like sympathy in his eyes. "Mrs. Brooks, I want you to prepare yourself. In my experience, when there are hotel charges and unexplained purchases like this, we usually find what we're looking for. And it's usually not a pleasant discovery." "I understand," I said, even though I didn't really. "Not yet. I just need to know the truth." For the next 2 weeks, Leonard worked his investigation while I pretended everything was normal at home. I smiled at Derek over breakfast. I asked about his day. I acted like the boring, devoted wife he'd complained about, all while my insides were twisting with anxiety and dread. Leonard called me when I was in Denver for a client meeting. "Mrs. Brooks, I need to meet with you as soon as possible," he said, and the tone in his voice made my blood run cold. "I've found some things. Not just about an affair, but about something much more serious." I flew home the next day and met him at the same coffee shop. He spread documents across the table between us, bank statements, email printouts, transaction records that made my head spin. "Your husband has been embezzling money from his accounting clients," Leonard said bluntly. "Small amounts from multiple accounts, transferred through a series of shell companies to hide the trail. I've tracked over $200,000 so far, but there could be more." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "Are you absolutely certain?" "Positive. I've been doing this for 30 years. The evidence is solid." He slid another document toward me. But here's where it gets more complicated. He's not working alone. Leonard showed me bank records for an account I'd never seen before, deposits and withdrawals that matched the embezzled amounts. The account was in a woman's name, Vanessa Brooks, Derek's sister. No, I said immediately, shaking my head. That can't be right. Vanessa lives 2 states away. She just got divorced. She's been going through a hard time. But Leonard kept pulling out more evidence. Email exchanges between Derek and Vanessa that were anything but brotherly. Text messages that made me feel sick to my stomach. Hotel security footage that he'd somehow obtained, showing them checking in together, touching each other in ways that siblings definitely should not touch. I also found something else, Leonard said quietly. Your husband and his sister tried this same scheme with Vanessa's ex-husband. They embezzled from his business partners about 5 years ago. The ex-husband discovered it, but he didn't press charges because he wanted to protect his children from the scandal. He just divorced Vanessa and paid back the stolen money himself to keep it quiet. I sat there in that coffee shop, surrounded by evidence of betrayal so deep and twisted that I couldn't fully process it. My husband was a thief. He was having an affair with his own sister. They'd done this before and gotten away with it. And now they were planning to do it again, this time leaving me to deal with the consequences. There's more, Leonard said, and I almost laughed because how could there possibly be more? He showed me printouts of plane tickets. 2 one-way tickets to Costa Rica, scheduled for departure in 4 weeks. They're planning to leave the country. I found communications about fake passports being prepared, about a new life they're going to start together. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the documents. What do I do? I whispered. Leonard leaned forward, his expression serious. You go to the police. You report the embezzlement. You protect yourself legally and financially, and you do it before they disappear. But I had a different idea. A better idea. I want to catch them in the act, I said slowly. I want undeniable proof, not just bank statements and emails, but actual evidence of them together. Can you help me do that? Leonard studied my face for a long moment. Then he nodded. Yes, but you need to be prepared for what you're going to see. It's going to hurt. It already hurts, I replied. At least this way, they won't be able to lie their way out of it. We spent the next hour planning. I would take my scheduled business trip to Seattle the following week. I would tell Derek I'd be gone for 5 days, giving him a false sense of security, but I'd fly back early, catch them together, and have Detective Patricia Green ready to make arrests based on the financial evidence Leonard had gathered. When I left that coffee shop, I felt like a completely different person than the woman who'd walked in. The naive wife who'd trusted blindly was gone. In her place was someone harder, colder, more calculating. Someone who was about to make sure that Derek and Vanessa paid for every single lie they'd told. The footsteps on the stairs grew louder, and I watched Derek's face transform from panic to something darker. Desperation. He looked at Vanessa crumpled on the floor, then back at me, and I could see his mind working frantically, trying to find some way out of this trap that was closing around them both. Natalie, please, he said, and his voice had taken on a tone I'd never heard before, begging mixed with anger, like he couldn't decide whether to plead for mercy or attack me for ruining his plans. Just give me 5 minutes to explain. 5 minutes before you let them come up here. I held my phone steady, still recording every word, every expression, every desperate movement. There's nothing to explain, Derek. I already know everything. Detective Patricia Green appeared in the doorway, tall and imposing in her dark blazer with her badge clipped to her belt. 2 uniformed officers stood behind her, their faces professionally neutral as they took in the scene before them. The woman in the silk robe on the floor, the terrified man standing over her, the wife with the phone in her hand, calm and collected despite the chaos. Mrs. Brooks, Detective Green said with a respectful nod toward me, you have the evidence we discussed? I walked over and handed her my phone, careful not to stop the recording. Everything's on here. The video I just took, plus all the documents Leonard Walsh gathered, bank statements, email exchanges, transaction records. It's all in the cloud folder I shared with you this afternoon. Detective Green's sharp eyes scanned through my phone quickly, her expression never changing. She'd probably seen worse things than this in her career, but I wondered if family betrayal like this ever stopped being shocking. She looked up at Derek and Vanessa, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Derek Brooks, you're under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. She nodded to one of the officers, who stepped forward with handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Derek's entire body seemed to collapse inward. No, 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 he kept repeating, like saying it enough times would change reality. This is a mistake. Natalie. Tell them this is a mistake. We can work this out. We're married. We're a team. The officer pulled Derek's arms behind his back, and the sound of the handcuffs clicking shut echoed through the bedroom. That sound felt like the final period at the end of a very long, painful sentence. You stopped being my team the moment you stole from innocent people, I said quietly. You stopped being my husband the moment you brought her into our bed. Vanessa was still on the floor, her breathing coming in short, panicked gasps. Detective Green crouched down beside her, her voice surprisingly gentle. Vanessa Brooks, I need you to stand up. You're also under arrest as an accomplice to fraud and embezzlement. I can't breathe, Vanessa gasped, clutching at her chest. I can't. I need. Please. She's hyperventilating, Detective Green said to the second officer. Get her some water and a paper bag from the car, but keep an eye on her. As the officer left to get supplies, Derek suddenly lunged toward me, or tried to. The officer holding him yanked him back hard, but Derek kept talking, words spilling out in a desperate flood. You don't understand, Natalie. You're never home. You're always working, always travelling, always putting your career first. What was I supposed to do? I was lonely. I needed someone who actually cared about me. The audacity of his words hit me like a slap. So you decided to steal money and sleep with your sister? My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. Those were your solutions to feeling lonely? She's not really my sister, Derek said. And the way he said it made my skin crawl. We're not blood related. My parents adopted her when she was 7. We're not doing anything wrong. Detective Green's eyebrows rose slightly, but her professional mask stayed in place. That's not going to help your case, Mr. Brooks. Regardless of biology, you're still committing fraud. And I don't think a judge is going to be particularly sympathetic to your personal justifications. The officer returned with water and a paper bag. Vanessa grabbed the bag and breathed into it, her mascara-streaked face a mess of tears and panic. When her breathing finally slowed, Detective Green helped her stand and read her the same rights she'd given Derek. That's when Vanessa found her voice. Not the sweet, gentle voice she'd always used around me. This was sharp and venomous. You're going to regret this, Natalie, she hissed. You think you're so perfect, so righteous. But you're just a cold, heartless woman who doesn't know how to keep a man happy. Derek deserves better than you. He deserves someone who actually loves him. I stared at her. This woman who'd called me sister, who'd cried in my arms about her failed marriage, who'd eaten my food and slept under my roof while planning to destroy my life. If you loved him, I said slowly, you wouldn't have turned him into a criminal. Real love doesn't drag someone down into darkness. It lifts them up. You don't know anything about real love, Vanessa spat back. The officer was trying to guide her toward the door, but she kept twisting to look at me. You're a robot in a business suit. Derek told me everything, how you never have time for him. How you care more about spreadsheets than your own husband. How boring and cold you are in bed. Each word was designed to hurt, to make me doubt myself, to shift the blame from their choices to my supposed failures. And maybe a few months ago, those words would have landed. Maybe I would have wondered if she was right, if I really was the problem. But I'd had 3 weeks to think about this. 3 weeks to talk to Beth, to talk to my therapist, Dr. Helen Watts, to understand that Derek's betrayal wasn't about my shortcomings. It was about his character, his choices, his willingness to hurt people for his own benefit. Take her downstairs, Detective Green said firmly to the officer. Both of them. As they led Vanessa out, she was still screaming. We're family, Natalie. Family doesn't do this to family. You're destroying lives. Those clients will get their money back eventually. Nobody really got hurt. But you're sending us to prison over nothing. Over nothing, I called after her, my voice echoing down the hallway. You stole over $200,000. You helped my husband betray me in every possible way. You violated trust, family bonds, and the law. That's not nothing, Vanessa. That's everything. Derek was being led down the stairs behind her, and suddenly he stopped fighting. His whole body went limp, and the officer had to practically carry him. Please, Nat, he whispered, looking back at me with tears streaming down his face. Please don't do this. I love you. I made mistakes, but I love you. Think about our 8 years together. Think about our wedding day. Think about all the promises we made. I walked to the top of the stairs and looked down at him. This man I'd married, the man I'd trusted with my heart, my life. My future. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by his own actions. I am thinking about those 8 years, I said, and my voice didn't shake anymore. I'm thinking about every time I came home exhausted from a trip, and you complained that I was never around. Every time I tried to plan a date night and you said you were too busy. Every time I told you I loved you and you barely looked up from your phone. I'm thinking about how I was building our future while you were plotting to destroy it. That's not fair, Derek sobbed. I was trying. I was working hard too. You just never noticed because you were always gone. You weren't working, Derek. You were stealing. There's a difference. I took a deep breath, feeling something inside me finally break free. Not my heart. That had broken weeks ago when Leonard first showed me the evidence. This was different. This was the last chain of obligation, of guilt, of misplaced loyalty finally snapping apart. We're done. Completely done. I want a divorce, and I never want to see you again. The officers continued leading them downstairs, their footsteps heavy on the wooden steps. I heard the front door open, heard Vanessa still crying and protesting, heard car doors slam shut outside. Then silence. Detective Green had stayed behind in the bedroom. She stood near the window looking down at the police cars in the driveway, giving me a moment of privacy. When she finally turned back to me, her expression had softened from professional detachment to something closer to compassion. "How are you holding up?" she asked gently. That's when everything I'd been holding together started to fall apart. The adrenaline that had kept me strong and steady drained away all at once, leaving me hollow and shaking. My hands started trembling so badly I had to clasp them together. The tears I'd been fighting back for 3 weeks, ever since that first meeting with Leonard at the coffee shop, finally broke through. I sank down onto the bed, the same bed where Derek had betrayed me, where he'd touched his sister in ways that made me sick to imagine. The blue comforter suddenly felt contaminated, ruined beyond any amount of washing. Everything in this room, everything in this house was tainted now. "I don't know," I whispered, and my voice cracked. I thought I'd feel relief, or satisfaction, something like justice, but I just feel empty. Detective Green sat down beside me, maintaining a respectful distance but offering silent support. She didn't try to fix it or tell me everything would be okay. She just sat there while I cried, letting me feel what I needed to feel. After several minutes, I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand and took a shaky breath. I keep wondering what I did wrong. How did I not see this? Was I really so blind? So stupid? "Stop," Detective Green said firmly. "This is not your fault. I've been a detective for 19 years, Mrs. Brooks. I've seen every kind of betrayal you can imagine. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that this has nothing to do with you being blind or stupid. Criminals are good at hiding their crimes," Detective Green continued, her voice steady and sure. "They practice deception every single day. Your husband and his sister spent months, maybe years, perfecting their lies. They knew exactly what to say, how to act, when to be affectionate enough to keep you from suspecting, but distant enough to create space for their real relationship. That's not your failure. That's them being calculated predators." I wanted to believe her. Part of me did believe her, but another part kept replaying moments from the past year, looking for signs I should have caught. The way Derek always seemed annoyed when Vanessa's name came up in conversation before her divorce, then suddenly became so concerned about her welfare after she left her husband. The expensive gifts he'd bought for her birthday that seemed excessive for a sister-in-law. The weekend trips he'd taken to visit her that I'd thought were sweet and supportive. How had I been so trusting, so naive? "What happens now?" I asked, wiping my face again. "With the case, I mean. What do I need to do?" Detective Green pulled out a small notebook from her blazer pocket. "Over the next few weeks, we'll be building the prosecution's case. You'll need to give a formal statement at the station, probably tomorrow or the next day. The district attorney will want to interview you as well. We'll need you to testify in court when the time comes, which could be several months from now, depending on whether they take a plea deal or go to trial." "Will they go to prison?" The question came out smaller than I intended, almost childlike. "Based on the evidence I've reviewed, yes. The embezzlement alone is a serious felony. Add in the wire fraud, the conspiracy charges, the fact that they were planning to flee the country. The district attorney is going to push for significant prison time." Detective Green looked at me carefully. "I know he's your husband, and this is hard. If you're having second thoughts about pressing charges—" "I'm not," I interrupted. I'm not having second thoughts. Those clients they stole from, some of them are small business owners, retirees who trusted Derek with their savings. They deserve justice. I trailed off, struggling to find the words. You're allowed to grieve, Detective Green said softly. Even when someone hurts you badly, you're still allowed to grieve the loss of what you thought you had. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. The front door opened downstairs and I heard rapid footsteps racing up the stairs. My whole body tensed until I heard Beth's voice calling my name. Natalie? Nat? Where are you? Up here, I called back, my voice hoarse from crying. Beth burst into the bedroom, her face flushed and her eyes wide with concern. When she saw me sitting on the bed with tear-stained cheeks, she immediately crossed the room and wrapped me in a fierce hug. I got your text. I came as fast as I could. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? I shook my head against her shoulder. No, I'm fine. They're gone. Detective Green arrested them both. Beth pulled back to look at me, her hands on my shoulders. You did it. You actually did it. God, Nat, you were so brave. I don't feel brave, I admitted. I feel like I'm falling apart. You're allowed to fall apart, Beth said firmly. You just caught your husband committing fraud with his own sister. You're entitled to lose it for a while. She glanced at Detective Green and nodded respectfully. Thank you for being here, Detective. Just doing my job, Detective Green replied. She stood up from the bed and handed me a business card. Mrs. Brooks, this has my direct number. If you think of anything else, or if you just need someone to talk to about the case, call me anytime. I mean that. I took the card with shaking fingers. Thank you for everything. After Detective Green left, promising to be in touch within the next day or two, Beth sat down beside me and took my hand. Tell me what you need. Do you want me to stay tonight? Do you want to get out of this house? Do you want to burn all of Derek's belongings in the backyard? Despite everything, I almost smiled at that last suggestion. Maybe later on the burning. Right now I don't know what I want. Beth squeezed my hand. Okay, then I'll tell you what you need. First, we're getting you out of this bedroom. You're never sleeping in here again. Second, I'm ordering pizza because I know you haven't eaten. Third, we're going to pack a bag for you because you're staying at my place tonight. No arguments. Beth, I can't just... Yes, you can, she interrupted. You're not staying in this house tonight, not after what just happened. You can come back tomorrow with me and figure out what to do with everything, but tonight you need to be somewhere safe where you can actually breathe. I looked around the bedroom, at the bed where Derek had betrayed me, at the dresser where Vanessa had apparently felt comfortable enough to leave her things, at the walls that now felt like they were closing in on me. Beth was right. I couldn't stay here tonight. Okay, I whispered. Okay, let's go to your place. Beth helped me pack a bag with clothes for a few days, toiletries, and my laptop. As I moved around the room gathering my things, I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. Everything looked the same as it had this morning when I'd left for the airport, but nothing was the same at all. In the bathroom, I found makeup and hair products that weren't mine. Vanessa's things, sitting right next to my own like she'd been living here. Like she belonged here. My stomach turned and I had to grip the edge of the sink to steady myself. She was staying here, I said, my voice hollow. While I was traveling, she was living in my house, sleeping in my bed, playing house with my husband. Beth appeared in the bathroom doorway, her face tight with anger. Don't think about that right now, just grab your stuff and let's get out of here. Downstairs in the kitchen, I noticed things I hadn't seen when I'd first arrived. 2 wine glasses in the sink, both with lipstick marks. A bouquet of roses on the counter that I'd never received. A woman's sweater draped over one of the dining chairs. Vanessa had been everywhere in my home, leaving her mark on my life like she had every right to be here. I trusted her, I said quietly, staring at the sweater. When she got divorced last year, I sent her flowers and a card. I called her every week to make sure she was okay. I invited her to stay with us for Thanksgiving because I didn't want her to be alone. And the whole time, she was sleeping with Derek. She's a snake, Beth said bluntly. They both are. But you know what? They're going to prison, and you're going to move on and build an amazing life without them. That's how this story ends. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to fast forward through all the pain and hurt and anger and land somewhere on the other side where I was okay again. But I knew it didn't work like that. Healing took time, and I was only at the very beginning of a very long road. We ordered pizza and ate it in Beth's car because neither of us could stand to be in my house anymore. As we drove away, I looked back at the place I'd called home for 8 years. The windows were dark now, the bedroom light turned off. It looked peaceful and normal from the outside, but I knew better. I knew what secrets those walls held, what betrayals had happened in those rooms. And I knew I could never look at that house the same way again. "I'm going to have to sell it," I said as Beth pulled onto the main road. "Probably," Beth agreed, "but we don't have to figure that out tonight. Tonight you just need to survive. Tomorrow we'll start planning your next move." At Beth's apartment, she set me up in her guest room with fresh sheets and extra blankets. She made me chamomile tea that I didn't drink and turned on the television to a mindless comedy show that I didn't watch. She just sat with me while I stared at nothing, processing everything that had happened. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. My heart jumped, thinking it might be Derek somehow contacting me from jail. But when I opened it, I saw it was from Leonard Walsh, the private investigator. "Just heard about the arrests. You did the right thing. Call me if you need anything at all. You're stronger than you know." I showed Beth the message and she smiled. "He's right, you know. You are strong. Stronger than Derek and Vanessa ever gave you credit for." 6 months felt like both forever and no time at all. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my new apartment, adjusting the collar of my navy blue blouse. The woman looking back at me seemed different somehow. Older maybe, but also more solid, more sure of herself. The apartment was small, just a one-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a building in the Arts District downtown. Nothing like the spacious house I'd shared with Derek, but every single thing in this space belonged to me. The sage green couch I'd picked out myself, the abstract paintings on the walls from a local artist I'd discovered, the kitchen table where I actually ate breakfast now instead of rushing out the door with a protein bar. This place was mine in a way that house had never been. My phone buzzed on the dresser, a reminder about my therapy appointment with Dr. Helen Watts this afternoon. I'd been seeing her twice a week since everything happened, working through layers of betrayal and trust issues I hadn't even known I had. Last week's session had been particularly hard. Dr. Watts had asked me what I missed most about being married, and I'd surprised myself by saying, nothing. Not the companionship, because Derek had stopped being a real companion years ago. Not the security, because that had been an illusion. Not even the future I'd imagined, because that future had been built on lies. "You're rebuilding your identity," Dr. Watts had told me. "For 8 years you defined yourself partly through your relationship with Derek. Now you get to figure out who Natalie is when she's just Natalie." The legal proceedings had wrapped up last month. Derek took a plea deal in the end, probably because his lawyer knew the evidence against him was overwhelming. 5 years in federal prison for embezzlement and wire fraud. Vanessa got 3 years as an accomplice, though the prosecutor had pushed for more. I'd attended the sentencing hearing, sitting in the back of the courtroom with Beth beside me. Derek had looked thin and pale in his orange jumpsuit, nothing like the man I'd married. When the judge asked if he had anything to say, he'd turned to look at me. "I'm sorry, Natalie," he'd said, his voice cracking. "I know that doesn't fix anything. I know I destroyed everything we had. But I am sorry." I hadn't responded, hadn't nodded or acknowledged him in any way. Because sorry didn't give back the 8 years I'd invested in our marriage. Sorry didn't undo the humiliation of discovering my husband was sleeping with his sister. Sorry didn't help the clients he'd stolen from, even though most of them had gotten their money back through restitution orders and insurance claims. Sorry was just a word, and words had stopped meaning much to me where Derek was concerned. The divorce had been finalized quickly. Derek had no grounds to contest anything, and his lawyer advised him to cooperate fully. I got everything: the house, which I'd immediately put on the market, both cars, all our savings that hadn't been seized as evidence. Derek would be paying restitution to his victims for years after he got out of prison, so he had no financial future to fight for anyway. I sold the house to a young couple expecting their first baby. They'd walked through it holding hands, talking excitedly about which room would be the nursery, where they'd put their Christmas tree. I'd felt a pang watching them. Not because I missed Derek, but because I was mourning the innocent version of myself who'd once been that hopeful about the future. The house sold for more than Derek and I had paid for it, and I'd used part of the profit for this apartment and invested the rest. Financial independence felt powerful in a way I'd never appreciated before. My new job had been a lifesaver. After the story broke in the local news, local accountant arrested for embezzling over $200K with sister's help. Several of Derek's former victims had reached out to thank me. One of them was Thomas Rivera, who owned a mid-sized marketing firm downtown. "What you did took guts," Thomas had told me over coffee 3 months ago. A lot of people would have looked the other way, or handled it quietly to avoid embarrassment. But you chose justice over comfort. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. He'd offered me a position as senior marketing consultant at his firm. Better pay than my previous job, flexible hours, and, most importantly, a team of people who valued integrity. I'd been there for 2 months now, and it felt good to be working with people I could actually trust. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. I checked the peephole and smiled when I saw Beth standing there with 2 coffee cups and a bag from my favourite bakery. "Thought you might need breakfast," she said when I opened the door, "and emotional support before your big presentation today." I'd almost forgotten. This afternoon I was presenting a major campaign proposal to a potential client, the biggest account I'd handled since starting at Rivera Marketing. My stomach fluttered with nervous excitement. "You're the best," I said, taking one of the coffee cups. "How do you always know exactly what I need?" 8 years of friendship, Beth replied, settling onto my couch. Plus, I have a calendar alert that says, "Natalie has big presentation, bring caffeine and carbs." We sat together eating croissants and drinking coffee, and I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. Beth had been my rock through everything: the late-night phone calls when I couldn't sleep, the weekend trips to the beach when I needed to escape, the firm but gentle pushback when I started blaming myself for Derek's choices. "I got a letter yesterday," I said quietly. "From Vanessa." Beth's expression immediately hardened. "Please tell me you burned it." "I read it first," I admitted. "She's in a minimum security facility in Pennsylvania." The letter was full of apologies and explanations. She claims Derek manipulated her, that she was vulnerable after her divorce, that she never meant to hurt me. "That's garbage and you know it," Beth said firmly. "She made choices, adult choices. She doesn't get to play the victim now." "I know." I pulled the letter from my desk drawer and held it up. "I'm not writing back. I'm not forgiving her. I just needed to read it once so I'd know I wasn't wondering about what it said." Beth watched as I tore the letter into small pieces and dropped them in the trash can. "Good. She doesn't deserve your forgiveness or your energy. You've moved on, and she needs to live with what she did." After Beth left for work, I finished getting ready for the day. As I locked my apartment door, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman looking back at me stood straighter now. Her eyes were clearer. She looked like someone who'd walked through fire and come out stronger on the other side. The elevator ride down felt different than it used to in my old life. No dread about going home to a cold marriage, no anxiety about what mood Derek might be in, just anticipation for the day ahead and whatever it might bring. Outside, the morning sun was bright and warm. I walked to my car, the one thing from my marriage I'd kept because it was practical and paid off, and sat behind the wheel for a moment before starting the engine. My phone chimed with a text from Thomas. "Ready to knock their socks off today?" I smiled and typed back, "Absolutely." As I drove through the city toward my office, I thought about how much had changed in 6 months. Not just the external things like where I lived or who I worked for, but the internal landscape too. The way I saw myself. The way I moved through the world. I used to apologize for everything. For working late, for being ambitious, for taking up space. Derek had trained me over the years to make myself smaller, quieter, less demanding, and I'd done it because I thought that's what love required: constant accommodation and sacrifice. Now I understood that real love doesn't ask you to diminish yourself. It doesn't mock you for being boring or criticize you for having goals. Real love sees you completely and celebrates who you are, not who someone wishes you would be. The presentation that afternoon went better than I'd hoped. The client, a sustainable fashion startup run by 2 women in their 30s, loved every aspect of the campaign I'd developed. As we shook hands at the end of the meeting, one of them said, "We chose your firm because of you specifically. We read about what happened with your ex-husband, and we were impressed by your courage." I'd nodded, accepting the compliment while feeling a familiar twist in my stomach. That story would probably follow me for a while, maybe forever in this city. But I was learning to be okay with that. I'd done nothing wrong. I had nothing to be ashamed of. That evening, I met Beth for dinner at a new Thai restaurant near my apartment. We sat outside on the patio watching people walk by as the sun set in shades of orange and pink. "I've been thinking about something," I said, twirling noodles around my fork. "About forgiveness," Beth raised her eyebrows. "Please tell me you're not considering forgiving those 2. "No," I said quickly. "Not them. Myself. I've been holding on to so much guilt about not seeing the signs earlier, about somehow failing at my marriage. But Dr. Watts helped me realize that I need to forgive myself for trusting people who didn't deserve it. For being human. Beth reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You were never the problem, Nat. You know that, right? I'm starting to, I admitted. It's getting easier to believe it. We finished dinner as the streetlights flickered on around us. Walking back to my apartment, I felt lighter somehow. Not because the pain was completely gone. It wasn't, and maybe it never would be entirely. But because I was learning to carry it differently. Not as a burden that weighed me down, but as evidence that I'd survived something difficult and come out intact. Back in my apartment, I stood on my small balcony with a glass of wine, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Derek was in a prison cell living with the consequences of his choices. Vanessa too. I didn't feel satisfaction about that exactly, but I didn't feel guilty either. They had made their decisions. They had chosen greed over integrity, lies over honesty, betrayal over loyalty. And now they were paying the price. I had made different choices. When confronted with their deception, I could have looked the other way. I could have divorced Derek quietly and let the embezzlement continue. I could have protected family secrets and avoided the public humiliation. But I'd chosen truth instead. Justice instead of comfort. And in doing so, I'd given those victims their money back. I'd stopped Derek and Vanessa before they could hurt anyone else. I'd stood up for what was right even when it was painful. That mattered. It meant something. My phone lit up with a notification. An email from my mom, who I'd been talking to more regularly since the divorce. She and my dad had been worried about me, but they'd also been proud. You handled this with such grace and strength, my mom had told me last week during our video call. I know it doesn't feel like it now, but you're going to be okay. Better than okay. I was starting to believe her. As I got ready for bed that night, I looked around my little apartment, at the books stacked on my nightstand, at the framed photo of Beth and me from college, at the plants I was slowly learning to keep alive. This space was small and imperfect, but it was honest. Everything in it was real. I climbed into bed, into sheets I'd chosen, in a room where no one had ever betrayed me. The silence was peaceful instead of lonely. The darkness felt safe instead of threatening. Before turning off my lamp, I opened my journal, another suggestion from Dr. Watts, and wrote a single sentence. Today I chose myself, and it felt right. I closed the journal, turned off the light, and let sleep come naturally for the first time in months. Tomorrow I'd wake up and do it all again. Go to work, see my therapist, maybe call my parents, definitely text Beth something funny. I'd keep building this new life one small choice at a time, one honest moment after another. The woman Derek had called boring was gone. In her place was someone stronger, wiser, and completely unwilling to settle for anything less than she deserved. Somewhere in the darkness, I smiled, because for the first time in 8 years, I was exactly where I was supposed to be, alone but not lonely, free but not lost, myself finally and completely. And that was enough.